Good morning. My name is Xtavia Bailey, and I am the president of Manatee Tiger Bay. Today, we're going to sit with a couple leaders in our community, also in law enforcement. We have a pastor and we have an attorney. And today, we're going to talk about the climate of the world right now. George Floyd was just murdered in an accident where a police officer had his knee on his neck. Now, we have an uproar that's going around today, and we want to talk about it. We want to have a conversation. We want to get perspectives from different people to see what we can do to move forward. I'm going to introduce you to each an individual, and we have today with us Chief Melanie Bevan. We have Sheriff Ricky Wells. We have Pastor Jesse Smalley, and we have attorney Jimmy Delgado. Please welcome them all. We're going to start with Chief Bevan. Just give us some of your insight on your feelings on what's going on.
Well, thank you. I'm going to just start with saying it's a privilege to be here today and really be part of not only the national conversation, but how it impacts Manatee County. There's nowhere in the world, truly right now, that is not impacted from this tragedy that happened. And truly, what happened is a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the American people. It's a tragedy for law enforcement and for every single one of us who wear that badge. I've heard the argument that it's the actions of a few bad apples, but we really just can't wipe away those bad apples and not expect that it really shines on all of us. And it's something that we as law enforcement all need to own. And as leaders in law enforcement, we not only need to own, but we need to take affirmative steps to change things, to do things better, and to ensure that our area, our region, our departments can never fall victim to what we're seeing unfolding. And I really think it begins with the leadership. I think it begins with conversations such as this, and I'm happy to be a part of this today.
Thank you so much, Chief Bevan. Sheriff?
Yeah, thank you. Also, it's a privilege to be here. I think this is exactly the setting that we need. We want to have open dialogue and seriously discuss the issues going on, not only in other parts of the country, but right here in Manatee County. I can tell you that as a law enforcement officer for 36 years, the very first time that I witnessed that video, it was sickening to me. I've seen a lot of terrible things in law enforcement in 36 years, and that bothered me, more than anything that I had ever seen, because that was a trained officer doing something that we all knew was wrong, and we all knew was going to cause injury and then death to that poor victim. And I knew that that's not what we teach. Mm-hmm. I already knew that's not how we operate. I already knew that our general orders prevent that, but I also knew that we were going to have to answer for it, regardless, and that we were going to have to explain to people and talk to people that that's not indicative of the law enforcement that you have here in Manatee County, and he does not represent what all of us stand for and what we try to do in the community. So our job is to constantly be in the community, especially our deputies who work and try to build relationships. And I just felt like that one horrific incident kind of ruined everything that we've been working on for the last 36 years that I've been around, and it hurt me. And I just hope that we can continue to work together and gain that trust.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. Pastor Smalley?
Thank you, Xavier, for being here. And I do agree with the sentiments of those who have spoken before, that definitely a dialogue and a conversation begins the process of what needs to take place, because it allows for understanding, and where understanding and common ground is where we begin to build bridges. It is difficult that we are in this particular climate, which is hostile sad, painful, all of those emotions that we're having to process. And being a pastor has a very unusual burden because not only do I have to process my emotions, but I also have to process and help other people process their emotions in a way that is constructive and not destructive, a way that promotes change and allows them to get through what is a difficult situation. Like everyone else, when I saw the video, I too was sickened and disturbed by what I saw. And I'm hopeful because what it seems to have happened, unfortunately, that it took these kinds of events, things that have happened over and over in different scenarios, that there seems to be a different awareness, things that may have been considered not to be such a problem. It seems like everyone else, because things may be a problem in other parts of the country and other areas, but because you don't have the same intensity or the same concentration of those, you may not necessarily identify it as it being as widespread. And what I'm observing, even from the two law enforcement representatives that we have today, that there is a deep concern about what has been seen and making sure that that particular situation is not something that we consistently see over and over again. And I think if we are all determined to ensure that there is both a mutual respect among citizens and an understanding among law enforcement, we can prevent future calamities such as this. So I'm excited to be a part of the solution and not the problem.
Thank you so much, Pastor Smiley.
Thank you for having me, Xavier.
Absolutely.
I have a little confession. I'm glad you didn't do this last week. And the reason is we spoke last week.
Yes,
and
we did.
When you called me, all I had was anger. I didn't think I could be that angry. And I was. And somebody on TV, I stole this from somebody on TV. I'm not sure who to give credit for it. They said, we spoke out, you didn't listen. We yelled, you didn't listen. We screamed, you didn't listen. We kneeled, you didn't listen. And then we write and you ask why. I think that we get caught up in this mentality of we treat the effect but not the cause. And what we have to realize is we have to get beyond that anger and have to realize what we're seeing today on TV is representative of people's pent-up emotions. And it was the worst time it could have happened. Not that there's never a good time, obviously, right? But it's a constant thing that's happening. We were in COVID-19 lockdown. You have people cooped up for 2 months. Where's your next paycheck? How am I going to pay my mortgage, my bills, my my kids are at home. I don't know how to be a teacher. Just all these emotions. I'm a business owner. For 2 months, my biggest fear is I have to support 15 families that are in my office. That was my first concern, and then this happens. And when I saw that, Xavier, I think I found out the next day. I'm not even sure. I know it happened Labor Day, but I'm not sure when I first heard it. And I'm walking by the television, I see that, and I hear that the police officers involved were fired. One thing I know about Minneapolis is you can't fire them. They have a very strong union. So I thought, that tells me that whatever they saw is going to be really bad. And I looked at my wife, and I just told her, she goes, her thing was another one. Right? And my daughter was like, another one? And I thought to myself, this is going to be different because they weren't just put on paid leave. They were fired, and they had body cams. And I thought to myself, this is going to be different. Something is different. And, I'm just, like I said, I'm glad we're doing it today because I think this is what we need. I know it's hard. And, it's hard when you metaphorically, and actually pun intended, when you've had somebody's had the knee on your neck for generations. The picture of that guy it couldn't be the irony of how Mr. Floyd died is something that it's just going to stick with all of us. And I just hope we can do something about it.
Thank you so much. Very, very, very heartwarming from everyone. We have Trayvon Martin, where the Black Lives Matters originated. They say their names. You have Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and Breonna Taylor. And yes, in some of these situations, there were issues where you might have had the person fighting back. But some people say when you get arrested, if you've done something wrong, yes, there are consequences. But we shouldn't die in the process. And one of the questions that I have for you all is, what would you consider the local landscape of relations between communities of color, law enforcement, and elected officials. How can we strengthen these relationships while staying true to our demand for reform and change? Anybody?
It was heartwarming to me in the days following this tragedy that, and I'm sure the sheriff, was the same, that the phone started ringing by folks in the community who were not only like you, leaders, you lead a great organization, but even folks in their own right who are leaders of their neighborhoods
That's
or
right.
of their families. I always tell my officers, I preach often about relational policing. Community policing is kind of the buzzword, but I try to take it a step further, talk about relational policing.
That's
You
good.
have to have relationships now because you never know when you're going to have to draw upon those relationships, and it's reciprocal. And I will tell you, it's been just incredible that we've been able to pick up the phone and just have some honest dialogue. I know over the weekend, the sheriff and I and the president of NAACP on a Sunday afternoon had a Zoom meeting. There we were in our T-shirts and shorts and just really had a great meeting about some steps we could take within the region to move forward. And I think that those are critical, and I think that it's very telling within this area with regards to how we're managing and how we're dealing with these things. And what you saw from all of the law enforcement leaders on that call, it was also Chief Tyler over in Palmetto, it was us saying, what can we do more? Tell us what you think we need to do as law enforcement to help get us through this as a community. And I think it's those conversations that are imperative. And at the same time, you're calling me saying, hey, Chief, what can we do on our end to help bring this community together? And those relationships, you better have fostered them before a crisis occurs. And I've got to think we've done a pretty good job of that.
I agree with the chief. I think right now what we're dealing with on the law enforcement side here in Manatee County, we have two groups. We have people in our community, in the minority community, that we've been working with for years, and we have done a lot of events together, and we've been out there, and we've provided backpacks, and we've always had open dialogue. And then you have this very small group that no matter what we say, no matter what we do, we are bad.
Absolutely.
It does not matter if we're right or wrong in a situation. We're always going to be wrong, and that's real, and that's how we're being treated. But the ones that are truly have fostered a relationship with us and have been around us, that they know that we are truly invested in trying to do the right thing all the time and be involved. So that's what we're dealing with. That's reality. So we know we're going to be criticized for something that happened here, and we're going to be criticized for situations that were 1,500 miles away. I mean, that's just what we deal with. So we're just trying to stay focused on the fact that we can't control everything. All we can do is continue to push and to help and try to be involved in the community that we serve. And we are going to do that. That's not going to change, and hopefully we can continue the dialogue. I would tell you that in Manatee County, the protests have been peaceful.
That's great.
People
That's
have,
wonderful to hear.
people have voiced their frustration and their anger and their concern, which is exactly what they should be doing. And we have been there to help them, get across the street and or stay in the intersection and help them be able to voice their opinion. But we have to continue to work on solutions, whatever that is going to be.
On this side over here, as you answer that question, excuse me, I also wanted to know what you think that looks like after those communications, after those conversations, after those relationships have been built. Where does that talking go? What actions do we truly need to take for those naysayers to actually come on board and be a part of this change?
There's nothing you could do. I mean, never in history has there been any side that's 100%. Anything that you do does not come with 100%.
Right.
authority or acceptance for the community. That's just life. We're human beings, right? Everybody has their own, everybody looks at life from their own perspective. And it doesn't matter, but the point is, I don't think you waste your energy with them. You know, you can't. You know, you got kids to think about.
That's right.
You know, you have to understand where they're, I mean, you have to kind of validate where they're coming from. You kind of understand it. But if you try to please them, you're really kind of doing a disservice to what you really want to do. You know, I think we're very fortunate here in Manatee County, to be honest with you.
Me
You know,
too.
of course, it's easy for me to say that, right?
Right.
Even though I'm Latino, people look at me and they figure, well, he's a white guy. You know, there's an implicit bias with looking at me that you don't accept who I am. You just figure, well, he's a good guy. You know, I'm white. You know, it's easy for me, but at the same time, it gives me a different perspective. And I've known the sheriff since I've been in Manatee County. You know, trooper, chief of police, and now sheriff. You know, and I haven't had the fortune of meeting Chief Bevan yet, but I've heard good things. Now, is there problems in their departments? Yes, they carry guns. You know, somebody was telling me about good people and bad people. We can all admit that there's good people in every career. And I'm not just talking about they're bad. They're just bad people. I know there's a lot of bad lawyers. Not that they're bad at being a lawyer, but they're just bad people, right? In every career field. So you have to be able to admit that there's police officers or there's sheriffs that are just bad people. You have to admit that. So, and we've all known the adage that power can make a good person bad. Can you imagine what power does to a bad person? You know, but coming back to the original point is we have an advantage here in Manatee County that we're a relationship-based area. I have a business, one of my offices in Sarasota, one is here, and it's a completely different marketing. Sarasota, it's very shiny and pretty on the outside, and the inside's a little different. Manatee County is the opposite. I don't care how much you pay for commercials. If they don't know you, they don't know you. You know, we have an advantage in Manatee County that we have a relationship-based. Like I said, it's not
Yes, we
perfect.
do.
We all have problems, but we have a big advantage. They said at the protest, they know each other. You know, either the chief or the sheriff or that deputy or that officer, he knows that person. It's not a city of 2.5 million people, sorry. They have to deal with them and their family. You know, they might see this kid and he's mouthing off, but they know their grandmother.
Absolutely.
You know, so we have to take advantage of our position. Can we make everybody happy? No, but that's not really the point. The point is, what is Manatee County going to look like in 10, 20 years? If we think we're going to fix it by next week, we're mistaken.
Absolutely.
There's way too much history. The real issue is the work that the chief and the sheriff do and that we do.
That's right.
What's it going to look like in 20 years? What's it going to look like in 30 years? That's really the correct approach. You know, and there's a lot of new things out there. You know, the uses of excessive force. Look, let's be honest. We don't have to call the cops out for everything. Why are they spending their time getting a kitten from a tree? An accident. You know, their role has changed. And is it fair? You know, because yes, it's easy for me. I was angry. I was angry at everybody. Everybody that wore, I'll be honest, I was angry at everybody that had a uniform that day. And for maybe a week, if I'm being honest. And then you kind of come to your sense and you start to understand. And the issue is, how do we get rid of them? Just like we get rid of bad people on the street,
That's right.
how do we get rid of them? Because they're not going to look good. And if the sheriff loses face and the chief loses face, we're not going anywhere. We'll be having the same discussion in 20, 30, 40 years, and we're never going to change.
And I would say to the question of what does the conversation, how does that transform? I think by extending the conversation from these settings to returning back to the cultures that we're responsible to and having a conversation that challenges the dynamics within those cultures. For example, I understand that the difficulties that comes with being a police or a sheriff. I understand the difficulties of that, and that within that culture, there's a need for trust, loyalty, and commitment. My partner needs to have my back to go into those kinds of situations. But that kind of commitment should not come at the lack of being held accountable. That I love you, I trust you, and I hold you accountable. But if you're wrong, I'm not going to allow the culture of being connected and committed and loyal come at the cost of my integrity. And I think that is one of the things that can help challenges when we begin to challenge conversations that challenge our culture. And I think each culture that is represented, whether it be cultures of minorities or the policing culture, all of those cultures can have some challenging points where there are conversations, difficult things that will challenge things within the culture that may help us interact and engage in a healthier way. But the conversations, we have to be willing to challenge certain dynamics within our comfort zones and things that are necessary but may need to be reevaluated. And to my point, and for example, you were talking about, I think it's called broken glass minor offenses, where
New
we
York
can,
policy, right?
yeah, where we can bring down the importance of it or eliminating, because I think it was in 2014 over 287 persons lost their lives as a result of that. And those a large part of those were homeless, those that were in public drunkenness. Some of them had mental illnesses, and so if we start highlighting things and change what has a priority, what the police are able to focus on, those are also lives that we can save by changing what is important. Again, that comes through identifying things within our culture that takes priority and in our community as relates to what keeps us safe. Really evaluating that, because what keeps you safe in one neighborhood may not be necessary in another. And how do we make that adjustment in a way that benefits everyone?
Thank you so much.
And maybe listen. I think one thing that they're crying out is just listen.
So let me follow up on a couple of things, because when you think about law enforcement and the hiring practices, 30 years ago,
Absolutely.
a lot different than they are now.
Yes.
So we have really tried to dig in as deep as we can to the true heart of an applicant, true heart, which is not easy. Not easy. And sometimes you don't really see the true person until you have an incident, right? And even though we hold them accountable, we may fire them, they may get charged, it still happened under our watch. I mean, we have civilians on our employment board to check applicants as well. They go through Sykes and Polys. Now we have to check social media, see what those posts have been like, right? There's a lot to vet
Yes, you
through,
do.
but we're not always going to be able to find that person with the best heart. And that's what hurts law enforcement more, in my opinion, than any other profession, is that when you have a person like that, it stands out more than that attorney or that doctor or, that realtor. I mean, it hurts us because that's a bad apple, but that bad apple affects all of us. And we're always having to work back and try to regain. So, and we have been there. Deputies here, and I can speak for Mel, we hold our deputies, other deputies hold other deputies accountable. They're not going to allow something to go on that's not only going to hurt the department, but may get him fired or her fired as well. They're going to report if they see an officer going too far. That's just the way it is now. It's a different time. And these younger deputies, they've gone to college. These are millennials. They've had to work hard to get here. So they're not trying to lose their career because we have a bad cop in the mix and nobody wants to say anything. Does it still go on? Absolutely. Throughout the country, yes. It may go on here. Not saying that it doesn't, but we work very hard to identify those cops that don't need to be wearing a badge.
And I want to comment on something you said. Ever since this happened, it's every day I'm learning something new. Not necessarily about the situation, but about what I should do as a chief in my organization to move us forward. I'm paying attention to what's happening. For example, I just learned the other day that one of the officers involved in this horrific event, this is fourth day on the job.
Wow.
Right? That's what the newspaper's saying, at least.
Wow.
Hopefully that's accurate. When my officers get off probation after they've been on the street for a year, they come before me, and one of the questions I ask every single one of them is I give them an ethics question. And it has to do with, I change it up, but typically they're in a convenience store, it was a break-in, it's them and a fellow officer, and you see the fellow officer reach down and grab a candy bar and eat it and throw the wrapper away. And I say to them, what would you do about that? And there's really only one answer. It's right or wrong,
That's
right? You're going to turn in that officer. You're going to report that conduct to a supervisor. I always thought that was good enough. They've been on the street a year. What have they learned? They've gone through training and development. What do I need to do now? that needs to be from day one, because now I need to make sure that they realize, as new officers walking in the door, that they need to start questioning misconduct, ethical behavior from everybody around them. They may not know how to be a police officer yet, but it goes back to what you said, and I've been saying that for 2 weeks. He wasn't a bad cop, he was a bad person.
Yeah.
They were bad people. Let there be no mistake about it. From that to, they started talking about use of force policy. We just pushed ours out last year. I said, but you know what? Maybe I've missed something. Let me make sure that my policy is capturing everything that I'm hearing right now, everything that I'm seeing. Have I missed something? Can I improve something? Let me look out at the national standards. Is there something I can add? And I think we're all remiss if we're not doing that each and every day right now to try to find where does it go from here? Because we've got to come up with an end product that we can stand behind in this region and say, this is what we've done, this is what we're proud of, and this is why we know in this area this can't happen, because we've done these things.
And I would say to that point, one of the gatekeepers of wisdom in this area, her name is Mother Gore. She says that people are like tea bags. You don't know what's in them until you put them in hot water. And I don't know, I don't know how.
That is a mother.
To your point, how do you put those new recruits in hot water? I don't know what that evaluation would look like. If there was a way to maybe start that discussion, what happens? How do you test what's in someone prior to that? I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but I do believe that when it comes to creating policies on my end, I think one of the ways to ensure that you can limit some of the naysayers is that when those policies are created, invite the community to play at least a part. Now, they may not have the background in criminal justice to know what's legal, what's not, but at least in your development, you can say, we engage the community on the policies that we're using, that we have incorporated at least the ideas in the conversation, so then a person can say that I was heard, and you can respond, I heard you. And I think that sometimes can make a difference, at least for me. You don't have to agree with me, but knowing that you heard me can sometimes cool some of the anger. Being heard is a very important part of easing some tension.
And part of that is understanding is there's only a certain amount that the sheriff or the chief can do in terms of the police officers and their deputies. You still have the union to deal with.
Absolutely. Let's
been
talk
doing a lot
about
of,
it.
like I told you, I've been
Let's
doing a
talk
lot
about
of reading
the
lately.
unions, yeah.
And one of the things that stood out to me, I've been asked, I have a lot of friends, close friends, that are either still law enforcement or retired law enforcement. My best friend is retired law enforcement. I sympathize with him. I was a military guy. I'm I was raised by a military guy. I was military myself. I get that fraternity, that fraternal feel, because everybody looks at you different. But there's a in Minneapolis, I believe the number was 75% of the officers who were fired got jobs somewhere else. So if you're just moving pieces around, you're not solving the problem. But it really doesn't matter whether the chief or the sheriff do the right thing, because now you have an intervening party that's telling you that's not the right thing, or they're just going to pluck him out and put him somewhere else, or you're going to spend years of litigation. I represented a young gentleman years ago down in Sarasota County that was beat up by a sheriff on film in the Sally Port down in Sarasota.
I remember.
Well, guess what? Fast forward, he got his job back. So, understanding the limitations. In that group you're always talking about is because I don't think we understand people's limitations. Understanding my limitations, the Reverend's limitations, your limit. We all have limitations. We were talking about earlier about if you don't protest, they make fun of you. If you do protest, somebody's always going to dislike what you do. Talking about, you asked earlier about that little small percentage. They don't represent all of us, and you're never going to have a solution. But here's what you have to fall back to. What are their jobs? And understanding their role. What is your job, and what is my job? And we have to understand our roles, but we have to be able to come to the same table. I can't get up and say something negative about them. It serves no purpose. Now, it does make me feel good, maybe.
For a
It
second.
might make a nice headline. My following, my little group on Facebook will love me. They'll do a little clap. Woo, you go, we'll vote for you. No, they're not getting elected. When has a flamethrower in this area ever been elected? It does not happen. It makes them feel good. It makes some people feel good. But the real issue should be is where do we want to be in the future? You know, if I call the sheriff and I just said something negative about him in the newspaper, you think he's going to take my call? Absolutely not. And vice versa. I will never help him again. We've had a relationship now for years. I mean, you know, I'm not going to get into the details, but one time we met in my office and he asked me about something. And I told him. And sometimes I called him and I asked him something. He told me. That's who we are.
That's right.
We're on different sides. I know politically we're on different sides. I don't really care. We're Manatee County. You know, I know election time, maybe we might not speak at election time. You know, I get that. I'm okay with that.
At all.
At all. You know, I'll wave to him, but I don't want to get too close, and he doesn't want to get too close to me. One time we took a photo together. I said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" It's election time. You know, he just laughed. But this is who we are, man.
Delgado,
This is who we are.
So, Jimmy, you talked about what I think is important, our roles.
Yeah.
What is everyone's role as we move forward? And how do we teach people what their roles are? Because like you said, this isn't about Facebook likes or Instagram videos. And, you know, I can't disrespect people and think that I could say, oh, I'm going to, you know, have a bad conversation with, you know, about the sheriff, put it on Facebook, and then I'm going to say, hey, can we have a meeting about this officer? Because why? Why do I want to speak to someone that you rather go on Facebook and talk, and you have like your people who follow you, but we're still not getting anything done? I guarantee those people aren't making any moves, yelling and screaming. That's not how we make moves. Like he said, some people don't feel like they're being heard. When I sat down with Chief Tyler and his assistant chief yesterday and Mike, and one thing Chief Tyler said is, I didn't know. One thing you just said is, maybe I need to do some more updating to my policy, some changes, put more things in there that is the climate right now, not 15 years ago, not like we've always done it. And I think this is the problem, is we all do things every day the same way. This particular incident with this particular cop and those other 3 cops has set America off. It might have not been Trayvon Martin. It wasn't, and I'm not saying that it's any difference, but this one has gotten our attention. This has gotten people to say, man, what if that was my son or my son's friend or anyone? What are our roles?
The other one's got our attention. It just might not have got their attention. You know, we have to understand that what happened the other day was the straw that broke the camel's back, because it was hard to defend. Everyone you've ever seen, look, I'm a defense attorney. There's one thing I'm good at is spinning things, right? This is just going to say it like it is, right? You look at it and you look at the evidence that's most favorable to you. It's not lying, it's just you concentrate. And other ones, they've always said, well, he didn't comply, he didn't do this. This one was hard. It was really hard to defend because it was an illegal tactic, and we saw him for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
To defend.
Correct.
Really impossible to defend.
Impossible.
And that was the difference. It was impossible to defend.
But it had a video.
But here's,
what if it didn't
but
have a
Xavier,
video?
here's what they could defend. They could defend the looting. You see, what I mean is, if my Facebook woke up. The people that I know how they feel, that implicit bias, I'm not saying racism. Racism is too hard. That implicit bias, those prejudices that people
We
have.
talked about that.
As soon as the looters started, they came awake because now they had something. See, everybody has a role. There is a lack of leadership on above. So the leadership we have is sitting right here in this room. And I'm not talking about me, and I'm talking about the Reverend. No offense to you, no offense to me, but we're nobodies. Those 2 right now are probably some of the most powerful, and Chief Tyler.
Yes,
Those
right.
3 hold the power, not our elected. I'm sorry, but not our elected. We said it's not to dog on them, but it's not them. They're the ones put in the spotlight.
Absolutely.
And how the chief and the Palmetto chief and the sheriff are going to act is going to say everything.
Absolutely.
And if you've noticed, we've been lucky, Xavier. We've been very lucky. We've been nice and peaceful.
We have.
And I hope
Stays that way.
that stays that way, because if not, we're just going to be doing this again, you know.
And to your point, when you were saying, what do we do? I think there needs to be an education on everyone's part, not just with the changing of new policies and making sure that there are changes within the department, but making sure the community understands. He made an excellent point that a lot of it is not on them. So then bringing the community in to be a part of the contracts that are negotiated between the union and the city, are we a part of that? Do we know how strong is that contract that's being negotiated? What's the language in it? That an officer gets 2 days to cool down before they're questioning. Well, I wouldn't get that. So those are part of that negotiation, or the handcuffs that are really put on you two, so to speak, as it relates to that we could be, there's a higher level that we can engage on and invoke change.
But see, people don't know the process. People don't know what you all can and can't not do, because I was asked the question, well, how many times can an officer be written up for excessive force before they're fired, before they're let go? How many times? Is it 2 times? Is it 15 times? Is it 30 times? How many times? And a lot of people said, like Jimmy said, they're also protected by the union. You have a teachers union. You have a teacher who might not be performing like a teacher who's busting their butt, but they're still there. So what do we do in that aspect?
Well, different agencies may do it differently. You know, it really depends, first of all, does he or she have a history of, maybe you never got a true complaint, but maybe you've heard of some excessive force issues with this deputy, and how bad was it? I can tell you that, and I'm not proud to say this, but we had to charge 4 different correction deputies in our jail in the last 4 years that battered an inmate. The inmate didn't complain. How we found out was from a video. Our videos, our cameras. One of those, it was a serious felony battery. He went to jail, but they lost their job. So, you know, in that type of case, one time. So it really depends. What are we talking about? Did he push them around? You know, it really, most of the time, excessive force is going to be kind of a one and done. You know, that's how you look at it. Just, you know, but every case is different. Hey, you know, we don't have a lot of time. As an officer on the road, as a deputy on the road, you don't have a lot of chances to make a mistake when it comes to excessive force. You don't. You really just don't. I mean, you know already that if I hurt someone, I'm going to be fired.
Let me ask the question, what do you suggest to the community? They see an officer getting, pulling over someone, and it's getting hot, and it doesn't seem like it's going the right way. I heard you said formal complaints. Should our people start making complaints directly to the agencies so you know that there's problems going on, and then you can go back and check the complaint? Like, what do we suggest to the community that's saying, what can we do?
I would say that it's happening. Everybody has a camera now. Everybody has a phone. The police officers and deputies get put on video more than any person in this county. You may not know it. Most of the time it pops up on Facebook before we get it. But that's how we do get some complaints from anonymous sources that will send us a video. And I tell you, and the chief and I have had a long discussion just in the last couple of days. And I talked to my deputies Tuesday and Wednesday. And I talked to them about body cams. I talked to them about the pros and cons. What's your thought? And overwhelmingly, they want it. And we're going to get body cams. Because we need to have the whole story.
Thank you.
Right? So let's see what that deputy or that officer is encountering from the first time, for the first minute all the way to the 15th minute, right? Not just a 20 or 30-second snippet.
That's right.
I want to see what's going on. And, and if they're doing what they're supposed to, they'll be fine. But we'll also have the other side of the story.
That's good. I think that would make a lot of people feel better. What I've seen, I know officers that have pages that I've seen that has had things on there that even offend myself. I don't know if you all are checking or they're required to not put things on Facebook, but what happens when we see stuff like that?
Let me comment on that. Shortly after my arrival here, I actually opened an investigation on one of my officers for inappropriate social media posts. And I heard from a lot of folks in the community, some union folks, that how can you regulate what they're doing on their personal time. And as a chief, I learned this a long time ago from a Chief Goliath Davis, who helped rear me, is that you can't always make decisions worrying about how people are going to react or if they're going to get their jobs back or anything else. And I will tell you, following that investigation, I fired that employee.
Wow.
And we went to arbitration, and he didn't get his job back. I won't tell you how frequently, but it's done frequently in my agency. We ask for their social media handles. I know it's I'm old. I don't have all that stuff. And that's something, it's actually, we tie it into our internship and volunteer program. I have young folks come in and I give them names and information. I say, find me something that shouldn't be there.
Wow.
And so I understand some of the issues surrounding social media, and I do, this goes back to the right to protest, right to free speech, and I firmly embrace that. And you have a right to those things, but you don't have a right to be a Bradenton police officer, right? You have a right to free speech, you have a right to your social media, your Facebook page, but you do not have a right
That's good.
to be a Bradenton police officer. And if you choose to be a Bradenton police officer, I have a policy that tells you what you can and you can't do with your social media. And so I will tell you that we collectively in this county and community, we watch that, we monitor that, because we know that reflects on us. We know that it does.
You're in the spotlight. This is, a police officer is huge to a kid. Go up to a 5-year-old and they look at you all like you are Wonder Women, Superman. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a doctor. I want to be a police officer. And some of those people do follow through and become police officers. What I've talked about in the community and what we talked about is sensitivity training, anti-racism. What can we do? People want to know that as a Black woman, yes, I'm very diverse in different places that I am in, but I also don't want to be discriminated against. I also want to stand next to a white woman and feel like I'm being respected the same way. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes I haven't felt respected. And I've seen racism in my community year after year. And I'll be 41 next week. And I know what goes on. And it doesn't matter because I have a degree. It doesn't matter. I'm still a Black woman. Why is it like this in America? I have no idea why in 2020 we are still here. But from slavery to the Jim Crow laws, our Black men who were demeaned when they went out and they were called boys, and in the lynchings, this is all still there in this culture. And each time as it breaks away, it's leaving, but it's still there. As a Black man and a pastor who is very educated, it's still there. As a Spanish man who's educated, yes, he said this, I can pass from white sometimes, but I still get discriminated against. It doesn't matter. So as a woman who has a 16-year-old son, to have that conversation when I know you. I know what you want to do for our community, and I'm learning to know you, and I know you'll pick up your phone and have that conversation. But everybody doesn't know that. And what he said about reaching out to the community, I don't know what we can do right now to educate, to understand the process, to bring the community in, to have a say, so those people who feel like they're not being heard can be heard, and they can feel it in their hearts, because I feel like once you touch someone's heart, people can change.
I don't think that there's anything we should do right now, actually, Stavia. I'm not sure we can. I think what they're doing for right now is kind of the right thing, just making sure everything's peaceful. Because we have to, that's a lot of anger. I mean, if I was angry, and I'm a 53-year-old man, I consider myself pretty, I'm pretty even-tempered for most of the time. And I was angry. I think
Yes.
right now we just have to understand that they're angry. We are angry. And maybe not right now is a time to do anything except listen.
I agree.
I think what we should be doing is, what are the conversations we're going to have, or what's my department going to look like? What's my community going to look like? What's my church? What's my office going to look like next year, a couple months from now?
Plan.
Because that's what I'm always a big believer in. Yeah, today's today, man. But I'm more interested in how's it going to be for my kids, right? How's it going to be for me? So I think that's what we should do. Right now, we shouldn't come to judgment and shouldn't make fun of them, and just kind of let them get it out. Let them get it out. Let the anger, because right now, having a civil conversation with somebody is really
gonna
not the
work.
best thing to do. All we can do is just trying to keep the peace, and the sheriff and chief and the other chief should be thinking, what's it going to look like next year? Or what am I going to do? How can I change? And we all have to, that's a struggle we all have. Like after this happened, I start thinking, how can I change? What can I do? What have I been doing wrong? My daughter told me not to be here this morning, Stavia. We were talking about this last night, and
I
she
think
was
you're
called
right.
to lead a protest in Sarasota, and she said no. She said, I'm not going to do that. A black person has to lead that, because before she left for California, that's what she did here. And she said, Dad, are you sure that you're the right person to be speaking about issues like that? And to be honest with you, I was nervous. I've never been nervous. I don't get nervous that much anymore. I was nervous, Xtavia, because I know what they're going to say. I know what people are going to say. But the issue is bigger than that. People have to understand, and what I've heard here so far is that all four of us were angry.
Absolutely.
And I think it's okay to be angry right now.
I would say, too, that I would understand your sensitivity, but I think that's what makes it powerful. One of the reasons why I think this is a turning point in our society is because you have not someone just looking like me, but someone who looks like you, someone who looks like you, someone who looks like you, all saying the same thing. That is extremely powerful. And I think that if we develop, and I agree that we are angry, and it's hard to reason with anger, not that some would say that we don't need to be reasonable at this moment, which is a whole nother argument, but I believe that if we develop a strong call-out culture, similar to what you were saying, I've been doing that on social media, and I'm finding out, seeing if my officers are engaging it. If the community knows that within your culture of policing, that you've taken a stance, that I am combing through, that I'm just as committed to their safety and your safety, and these are things that I'm doing. If I'm made aware that you are strong enough and your integrity is high enough that you're willing to put the microscope under your own department without me having to tell you to do that, that is very powerful. To me, even me sitting here hearing you do that, that's a transition in thought for me, because it's saying I didn't have to tell you to take a magnifying glass to you. You decided to do that in order to improve your department. If we can hear and see that there is a strong call-out culture, that's what I call it, amongst us all, where I'm willing to call out my own and take the heat for that. I think that's another way that we build a certain level of trust, because I know that your commitment to right is stronger than your commitment to where you come from and who you're connected to.
Let me say this real quick.
Absolutely.
Because we're constantly trying to, check and improve our policies. I mean, this is constant, the training that we can send our deputies to, either de-escalation or sensitivity training. And they get a lot of good training, and they're happy to continue their education in this law enforcement profession. Nothing that we have ever seen before, no training, no video, would have ever given a deputy at the Manatee County Sheriff's Office the notion that they had the right to have their knee on a man's neck for 9 minutes. That's so egregious what we saw. That's not taught anywhere in this nation. See, and so, there's a lot of training we can do. And we'll go right back to it. That's an evil person. That's evil. That's evil. I mean, that just does not occur in this profession, and that's why we're in so much pain over that, because there's no training in this country that would allow you to do that.
When you think about this statement, hope is not the strategy for change. What is the strategy?
I think, since you looked at me, I'll take that. I think that the strategy is the commitment to what you're hoping for. So if I hope that things are going to improve, my commitment to improving things becomes the strategy. Because if hope becomes the strategy, then you ensure that things will not happen. And that's the difference between having a dream and having a vision. You have to move it from, this is what I dream. A vision comes with details, strategies, a systematic structure that we put in place. And so as long as we exist in hope, which can be, and it can make you feel good, I hope, and it can create emotions, it can create the great sensations, and sometimes we can be put to sleep. Hope can become a lullaby that puts us all to sleep, and that's one of the things that I think the protesters are very adamant about, not allowing themselves to be lulled to sleep with hope talk. I need something that I can transition to. What do I do? How do we challenge the young people that are out in the streets? How do we then do that? Maybe the next wave of law enforcement are the ones that are protesting in the streets. So what is our strategy for engagement, involvement, and improvement so that we can impact what's around us?
That's good. Anyone want to comment on
I was hoping I'd win the lottery, wouldn't have to ever work again.
Hope is not strategy for change.
Yeah, I'm not a big, hope, I mean, there's a lot of things I hope for, right? It's bigger than this. What we've been talking about today is how do we deal with the Manatee County, because that's all we can control. Remember, I started, we can't control this. But let's just be honest of who the United States really is. Like what you're seeing on the streets, that's who we really are. But the real question is, are we ever going to be who we think we are, right? Because what makes the United States exceptional is not that the people are exceptional, is that we believe in an idea that's exceptional. That there's this overlying, the American way, the American dream, but if you really look at it, that American dream isn't really, we don't really have it. Let's just put this simply. 339 years of slavery, 84 years of segregation, 65 was the Civil Rights Act, 64, 65, right? I was born right after that, into a whole different generation. My point being is, we've never addressed that. We just say things like, well, I'm tired of talking about it, or I don't want to talk about it, or that's the past. That's the past. But it's not. Desmond Tutu did something in South Africa in apartheid that was very different. We've all heard about truth commissions, truth and reconciliation. And with Desmond Tutu, he did a hybrid of the truth commissions. Historically, a truth commission was one side, you investigate one side, you find out all the bad stuff, and then you prosecute those when necessary. Desmond Tutu did a little bit different. What he did was one side apologized, was investigating, apologized, and the other side accepted the apology. We have never apologized, and there's been no apology accepted. What I mean was, when the Civil Rights came out, all that happened at the convention is the Southern party got up, walked across, and left the party. And they paid a price for it. We've never had a Jesus come to meeting on the Civil Rights Bill. We're not starting from the same starting line. So to think that everything's going to be okay is just not true. That little group that we're all talking about, that little splinter in all of our thighs, because just as much as they're in your thigh, they're in my thigh too. I know what it's like to be called a sellout. I get it. But what they don't understand is you don't change 400 years in a year. What you do is you start setting the practices now. How am I going to act? We can only control what we do. How am I going to act? How am I going to treat my neighbor? And you hope that kind of bleeds off. If you try to change the world, that's a big piece of pie to eat.
And we can't do this in an hour either. But if you could all give me about 45 seconds of a closing. And Chief Bevan, we'll start with you if you want to respond and close out also.
We've talked about a lot of things today, but I just want to give a few moments to talk about the officers who are out there every day, and I'm going to try to speak for the sheriff as well. I will tell you that in Manatee County, in the city of Bradenton, that I work and lead exceptional police officers. I will sit here today and tell you that what you saw, what you've seen in other parts of the country, I just can never imagine that happening here. What we do to ensure that we hire good people, that we train people, that we watch people, that we just give our officers everything they need, the tools to do their job, and then reinforce relational policing, community policing. Y'all have a great group of men and women out there keeping this community safe. And so my message is simply that in Manatee County, you are policed by the best of the best. And that's my assurance to you, and we will continue to ensure that that's the case.
Thank you.
I'll just echo that. I'm very honored to be the sheriff of Manatee County and very honored to have the privilege to work with some extraordinary men and women in law enforcement who have dedicated their life to do something that many cannot do and that would not do. And they do a lot of things in this community that you will never know about. We don't post it on Facebook. We don't show them giving money to the homeless or clothes to a family that we just met in a hotel room. And that's what they do each and every day. And they want what's best for this community, just like all of us in this room. And they're going to do their part. And when we talk about hope, hope requires action. We have to have action. And that's what we promise to give you.
Thank you.
I think our commitment to listen, to hear, and then respond is going to be crucial to how we frame our future. And I feel encouraged by today. And I would just say that as someone with whatever level of influence that I have, that my commitment is to hear, to listen, and to respond. And I think that if we start there, the possibilities are promising.
Mine's actually quite simple. It's history. I think we all need a few classes in history so we understand why we are here today. Didn't start yesterday, didn't start on May 25th, and have that better understanding so that when you see what's going on, you don't have to agree with it. You just have to understand it. And I think that we should just do a lot more listening. And like I said, you only control your family, right? Your house. So make sure your house is in order. And we just have to take responsibility of ourselves. I've had my business here in Manatee County. I've adopted Manatee County as my own. And I love this place. And all the good and all the bad. It's a little rough around the edges sometimes, but I love this place. I love the people here. They've been good to me. And I just think that everybody out there who has been successful, remember who your community is, and you have to ask yourself, what are you doing for the community? It's not what the chief and the sheriff is. We all have to ask ourselves, what am I doing? Am I leaving a positive feel, or am I leaving a negative feel? Because negative is easy. Anger is easy. Being positive and hopeful, that's hard.
I want to thank you all so much for coming out today. And then to Chief Tyler and Chief Tokager, who is not here today, I thank you and your officers and everything you do. This is a very, very important conversation. It doesn't stop here. And I just like to say it's like one love, one heart, one nation. My name is Xavier Bailey. I'm the president of Tiger Bay, and I thank you. Have a great evening.